Good morning and welcome to the Morning Scoop for Tuesday, March 30th. This is your daily Buckeye Fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 166 days. The game against Michigan in 242 days. Ohio State is now one-third of the way through its spring football practice schedule. Buckeyes held practice number 5 out of 15 on Monday at the Woody Hayes as they continue to work their way through to the April 17th spring game. That's far enough into spring ball that there's some trends are starting to emerge from practices, so that's what we're going to talk about today. What we've learned a third of the way through spring ball. My guest today is Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman, who conveniently enough just wrote an article entitled, "What Have We Learned About the Buckeyes on Offense?" So Tony, first of all, thank you for content that's tailor-made for a morning show conversation. And second of all, thank you for joining me.
I only do content with the thought of how can this better serve Tom? So you're welcome.
If only everyone was as dedicated as you to making my life easier. We're going to start with the position that everyone always asks about, the quarterbacks. There has been new information coming out on our Ask the Insiders board on all three guys, basically every practice at this point. You actually asked Ryan Day about this on the conference call yesterday. So, I mean, it sounds like it's still very much a wide open competition.
Yeah, very much a wide open competition. And the one thing I asked him is does Kyle McCord have an easier road than he would normally? And I don't know that he actually answered that. He just talked about how it's still early. And I guess that's also putting it on Kyle McCord, where, yeah, sure, it would normally be an easier road, but it's still up to Kyle McCord to get through it. And, you know, these are three guys, none of them have thrown a pass in college football. So there's some equal footing there, but it's still, you know, when you start out so young with all three of these guys, no spring last year and very little preseason, and you lose half of your games. So CJ Stroud and Jack Miller, we know they were behind. So I do think that evens the playing field, but it's still Kyle McCord's first action as a Buckeye. Yes, he was here in the winter, but now he's through 5 practices as of today. So yes, the standard of it's really early, but we have also on the Ask the Insiders board, as you mentioned, there's been intel on I think all three of these guys about where they're standing out, and they have made plays. And that was one of the things that they said, that yes, they all have the arms to make the throws, and they all three look good against air, and they can do what is needed. But then it's just a matter of, you know, can they do it during a game? Because these guys aren't going to be live. He was asked about that last week, I believe. You've got like 3 quarterbacks. 2 of them are expendable, right? Why can't you make them live? And then Dave's like, no. We do not make the scholarship quarterbacks live here. And so they won't be getting hit until really they travel to Minnesota.
And Tony and I talked about the quarterbacks in a lot more detail on the episode of Buckeye Weekly that dropped yesterday, so you can go check that out if you want to hear a lot more about the 3 quarterbacks and kind of where things stand and what we're reading into what Ryan Day said and how Ryan Day said it. So you can find Buckeye Weekly and all of the great podcasts from Buckeye Weekly, from Buckeye Scoop, on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, all those places. Just search Buckeye Weekly or Buckeye Scoop, and you'll find all of our great shows. One of my favorite Nevada Buck nuggets, each camp, and we just got a fantastic one, is which guy tested as the fastest on the team, because they'll do speed testing and strength testing and all that kind of stuff. So last fall, it was Justin Fields, which was probably not too surprising. Like, if you've seen Justin Fields run, it's like, yeah, that dude looks fast. So this spring, it's one of the running backs. Okay, makes sense. Like, it's a position filled with speed. They've got a lot of talented players. But, Tony, I feel like if you told the average Ohio State fan one of the running backs just tested as the fastest of that team, it might still take them like 3 or 4 guesses to find out who it actually was.
Yeah, and then when you tell them it's Master Teague, some still won't believe you. But this is a guy who would camp at Alabama and Ohio State as a recruit and was running hand timed, you know, in the 4.3s, which we know hand time, schman timed, but it's still relative to everybody else running. And so, yeah, he's, I think, incredibly fast in the open field, as we've seen. Once he gets past that first line of defense, he doesn't really get caught from behind. And the maybe as evidence of his tremendous speed is the struggle with the slowdown, you know, to gear down and make people miss. He gets going too fast. But yeah, and one of the other things that has been talked about with Master Teague is he is the incumbent. Ryan Day said it. It's like it's essentially his job to lose. And, you know, he's rushed for almost 2,000 yards now as a Buckeye. So there's going to be he's got that experience that nobody else does. However, like, whenever we talk to coaches, and Kevin Wilson even mentioned, like, yeah, these 2 young freshmen, And it's always, you don't have to look hard to have some mentions about Evan Pryor and Travion Henderson about what they can do with this offense. And Ryan Day mentioned it again today, where he was asked about, the last two classes, or asked on Monday about the last two classes, who could step up. And he mentioned the running backs, Evan Pryor and Travion Henderson again, that they have the ability to be part of this offense this year. And as I've said before and said on other shows, like these two guys are, Ohio State doesn't have anybody else like them. And so they are different. And then they're similar to each other, but also different from each other. And that was one of the things we found when we talked to them last week, where Travion Henderson said, I can't wait to get hit. And Evan Pryor is like, I'm not trying to get hit. I'm trying to score touchdowns. So that, getting hit is not something I want to have happen. And so while they're both home run hitters, they do it in different ways. And so that's been some interesting things. And we know Marcus Crowley has had some good moments in the spring, as Nevada has mentioned, but also as we've seen in the photos and the highlights, you could see Marcus Crowley running free of the defenders and at least a couple of shots. So he's had some moments and he's healthy. And so it's six deep. Tony Alford said, I've never played six guys, so there are going to be some uncomfortable conversations, but they're not going to be happening in March or April.
No, and I mean, you just mentioned four of the six guys. The other two, Steel Chambers, Mayan Williams. I mean, Mayan Williams was getting reps in the college football playoffs. Steel Chambers averaged 7, 8, 9 yards a carry the last couple seasons. It's like Marcus Crowley and Steel Chambers have been like over 7 yards a carry each of the last couple of years. So there's no shortage of talent in that room. And yeah, that seems like that, Teague is viewed as the incumbent. That still feels like one of the most unpredictable spots in the field right now. Cause it's like, I could take any of at least maybe four guys and say like, that could be the number one running back by mid-October. And it wouldn't shock me. Another spot where Ohio State is just loaded right now is wide receiver. And from what Ryan Day said, that may allow them to get back to a deeper rotation. That's something that they have loved to have in the past, that I think they've seen a lot of benefit from in the past. They kind of got away from last fall because they were so young and they had kind of the wonky fall camp. But it sounds like that 6-man rotation at receiver may be coming back this fall. Yeah,
when you look at the guys that they couldn't play last year but started to play, like Jackson Smith-Njigba as a freshman played relatively early. Julian Fleming came on later. G. Scott never really got too involved. Those guys are now in their second years and getting to go through spring and having played, they did get to play last year. And so they have the experience now to where they can be trusted even more so. We know, as I said, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who is top 3 or 4 guy on the team right now. But the question still comes down to how often are they going to be willing to remove Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave? And probably not that often, but still you can rotate everybody else and you will be able to take them off the field for play. Like if you send Chris Olave down on a 9 route, he's going to come off the field right after that, like whether it's completed or not. So there will be opportunities for other guys. And they do have 6 guys. And that's not even talking about the 3 freshmen who are also, we're hearing very good things about them with Emeka Egbuka and Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jaden Ballard. So they're deep. Cameron Babb was another guy who was mentioned from one of Nevada's Nuggets, and that's a guy who's been around forever. Does not have yet a catch at Ohio State, but is impartial media. But everybody is rooting for that guy to get what he's worked for, and so that's one guy that you'd like to see burst through and do something. But that's basically mentioned 10 guys or alluded to 10 guys right there. And that's not mentioning, we saw Jalen Harris back in action in spring. So that's another positive thing. And so they're just so deep. And with Ryan Day has mentioned this before, the transfer portal is a real thing and it is a real factor. And if you don't play guys, you're going to lose them. Now, yes, they have to be good enough to play, but if those guys who are good enough to play aren't playing, then they can go play somewhere else, and they know it.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State just lost Mookie Cooper after 1 year to Missouri, and that's someone who came in as a top 100 player, was at Ohio State 1 year, and then went to transfer to an SEC school. So, like that is a thing that can happen sometimes. So, yeah, the depth there is so interesting because there's just so many things you can do because teams are not going to be this is the same thing that we talk about with the Ohio State defensive line wearing down opposing offensive lines, where they can just throw wave after wave of people at them at the other team, and the other team is not subbing out. The other team is probably not subbing out 6 cornerbacks. So, you mentioned Chris Olave running a 9 route. Like, okay, Chris Olave runs a 9 route. Then you put Julian Fleming in against that same defensive back, and he runs a 9 route. Like, eventually that adds up over the course of the game. And then you're running against tired defensive backs and going against a tired offensive line and all that the next, in the fourth quarter. And ta-da, you have a big advantage. So that's one of the places that can play out. Another spot where Ohio State has some pass catchers, not as much depth though. This, of course, it is, as Nostradamus foretold, the year of the tight end at Ohio State. So Jeremy Ruckert is back. Seems like about as sure a thing as the Buckeyes have had there for years, that, Jeremy Ruckert is going to have at least a very good season, put up a couple of highlight reel plays, and then get drafted pretty highly in the NFL next year. Behind them, though, it's just basically like a mystery. I mean, Ryan Day was asked about Cade Stover on yesterday's Zoom call. What did he have to say about Cade Stover and where he stands right now? Because he seems like he might be kind of the next guy behind Ruckert.
Yeah, he continues to do what they need him to do and impress, and is growing into that role. Now is another guy who missed spring last year, and then also had 3 other guys in front of him last year with Luke Farrell and Jake Osborne and Jeremy Ruckert. So there were just no reps for him, and so he's still growing into that role and becoming what he needs to be and getting used to the opportunities. And I think he's a smart player, and I think the expectations there are that he will be able to do what is needed, but the experience factor, just messing up and learning from those mistakes and getting those reps and playing with the starters in a 12 personnel look and all of these things that he never got to do before. How quickly does he adapt to it? How quickly does he eliminate the mistakes? That will dictate whether it's the year of the tight end or the year of the tight ends, Tom.
Oh,
and we know Jeremy Ruckert has dropped weight, so that he's going to be he wants to be a more explosive receiver in the offense. So because he's gotten strong enough, that's one of the things that Kevin Wilson said. He's gotten strong enough. They don't need him at 255 if he can be beneath that. And he said they talked to one of the top tight ends in the game who played last year at 240, and I'm guessing they talked to an NFL guy doing that. And so as long as you're strong enough to hold the point of attack, and this is Jeremy Ruckert, who was a wide receiver, essentially never played tight end until he got to Ohio State. So they had to bulk him up. But then once you get him bulked up and strong enough, now you can cut weight and the strength remains, and now he's more explosive. And so while they are looking for that second tight end and they think it'll be Cade Stover, that first tight end is going to be pretty exciting to watch too.
Yeah, that is something that I think is going to be a lot of fun to watch. How can they, there's so much talent in that wide receiver room that you can't focus too much on that tight end. So this could be the year that you really do have a tight end kind of go off. I mean, they had 3 touchdowns in the semifinal game against Clemson between Luke Farrell and Jeremy Ruckert. So you never know. Maybe this is the year the prophecy is foretold. How about that? Wouldn't that be crazy? Last up, the guys up front with the offensive line. You had a great line in your piece this week. Said they have more moving parts there than a Rube Goldberg machine this spring. But that sounds bad. It sounds like, oh, this is complicated. They don't know who's going where. Like, that's actually a feature, not a bug. And I mean, that is a pretty good sign. You have some real good depth at that position.
Yeah, and you go back to the way Jim Tressel and Jim Bowman wanted it. They wanted versatility, but they wanted it out of like 8 guys. And here at Ohio State now, they get that versatility out of like 15 guys. There's just more population there. And you're looking at like Paris Johnson is starting out at guard. We know he can play tackle. He play any 4 spots other than. And I wouldn't bet against him being a very good center. So, being as naturally talented as he is. And then you get down to right now, we know Harry Miller is out this spring. We know he could play any of the 3 interior spots. Matt Jones is now at center. He could play any of the 3 interior spots. Saw a video Ohio State posted of Josh Fryer playing guard. We know last year and this year as well, he's played some tackle. And as Ryan Day has said, the guards and tackles are almost interchangeable in what they want to do. Like Kevin Wilson said, some of the pass sets are differently, of course, because you're going against different guys. But they want this versatility so that they can find their five best, because that is the most important thing. Find that five best, and then they'll be versatile enough to where one of these guys can play center, because obviously you need to have that center, and they know they have the tackles with Thayer Munford and Nicholas Petit-Frere, but also maybe, as Brian Day said, it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for one of those guys to slide inside if they like Paris Johnson better outside. So as you said, so many moving parts, and that's just the top 5 or 6 guys, because then there's, as I said, Josh Fryer can play multiple positions. DeJuan Jones can play multiple positions. Max Ray, as a tackle, has played very little, came in last year against Michigan State, started and played very well. And so there are guys who are growing into it. Luke Whippler can play anywhere on the interior, just so many different guys. And they'll find their 5 best, then they'll find their third tackle, and they'll find their third guard, they'll find their second center. And that third guard or third tackle could end up being the same guy. It could be DeJuan Jones, because he's talented and can do whatever you need. And so, but then also they're deeper than that. So they could go they probably, you look for your best 5, look for your best 10, and they have versatility on both the first and second team. So it's, as you said, it's definitely a feature, not a bug, and there's no pigeonholing. And I think maybe that's how you find the best 5.
Yeah, I mean, you go through the offense and it's like quarterback, wide open, running back, pretty much wide open, wide receiver, yes, Chris Olave, yes, Garrett Wilson. After that, pretty much wide open. Tight end, yes, Jeremy Ruckert, pretty much. After that, wide open. And then offensive line, yeah, I mean, both tackles are probably where they're going to be, but everything else is pretty wide open. Could be any number of different people in there. So this is going to be a fascinating spring to watch as it continues to play out. And there is no better place to watch it play out than at BuckEyeScoop.com. We have our incredible team of insiders covering the team, covering recruiting, covering everything you could possibly want to know. Future Buckeyes. Mick Walker was just at a camp in Findlay over the weekend, checking out some potential future Buckeyes. And as things are starting to heat up, as we talked to Alex Gleitman on yesterday's show, camps are going to start to open pretty soon. Recruiting visits are going to start pretty soon. That is all coming very, very soon. And I think there's going to be a flurry of action and a flurry of stories to follow, unlike anything we've seen since we launched the site close to a year ago. This is we have been waiting a year for all this stuff to finally open, and now it is finally happening. So this would make this a great time to join BuckEyeScoop.com. You can get access to all of our great insider content, our team of insiders, and all the great stuff on our Ask the Insiders board, that wonderful community. Lots of fun content, lots of very active conversation. That is all at BuckEyeScoop.com. Mentioned earlier, we dropped a new episode of Buckeye Weekly yesterday. You can check that out. You can check out all of our great podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spreaker, Spotify, you name it, it's there. Just search Buckeye Scoop. You can subscribe right there. Also leave us a 5-star rating and review. And finally, check out our YouTube channel, that's completely free, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. You can subscribe right there. We put up all our podcasts there, but also we've had the full interview with Ryan Day yesterday. We talked to Ryan Day for a half hour about any number of different topics. You can find that on our YouTube channel as well. So just go to youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop and hit that subscribe button. Then you'll get notified every time we post a new video, and you can say, hey, I'd like to watch that. And then you can watch it. And we could not possibly be making this any easier for you. All you've got to do is subscribe. So that'll do it for today. Thank you guys for listening. Have a great day. We will talk to you tomorrow.